You're listening to the Men's Dating Mastery Podcast with host Alec Chase, bringing you the experts in dating, sex, and relationships.
Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the MDM Podcast. I am a little bit biased about today's episode. I'm a big fan of dance, and so I am very excited that my guest today is Patty Contenta. Patty is a professional dancer with over 25 years in the industry. And what makes her particularly interesting to me is that she uses her knowledge of dance to help people improve their body language in everyday life. This is a very practical episode as Patty provides very specific and actionable advice that you can use. Our conversation topics include how dance can help you with your body language in day-to-day life, the most common trouble areas in man's body language and nonverbal communication, specific tips on creating more attractive body language, interpreting a woman's nonverbal communication in order to pick up on cues that she's interested, becoming a more charismatic man, tips for starting to improve your body language without overwhelming yourself with too many nuances all at the same time, and just for fun, I asked Patty if women judge how a man is in the bedroom by the way he moves on the dance floor. Every single one of these discussion topics is accompanied by very specific and tangible insights, so I'd advise you to listen attentively so you don't miss anything. As in every episode, if you like what you hear, then subscribe, rate, and review this podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now let's welcome Patty Contenta. Hey Patty, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. I'm excited to speak to your men specifically.
Fantastic. Well, speaking to our men, let's start with a brief introduction of yourself and the kind of work that you do.
Sure. I do two things. First, I am a ballroom dance coach, teacher, judge, any of those titles. I've been in the ballroom dancing business for at least 25 years now. I have my own studio and I also travel a lot in order to judge and consult within the business. And basically have taught so many people how to dance, both men and women, and have a very good understanding of how to help them really get in touch with the essence of dance and help them express themselves in a manner that enhances their unique personalities, be it a man or a woman. So that's my expertise within the dance realm. And then I also coach more women than men, although I have also coached men in this other domain, if you will, with my online work by helping women who are struggling with their body image exude a more natural feminine confidence through body language and through dance. So those are the two sort of type of careers that I handle right now.
I was actually going to end with this, but I think it might make more sense to actually start with it. If I know anything from your story, it's that you've learned to take the body movements and the gestures that you know in dance and apply them to everyday life.
Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit about that, how that transition works, how you were able to pick up those subtleties from dance and actually apply them in your day-to-day interactions?
Well, it happened after a divorce. So we sometimes, it's funny how, when you go through something challenging in your life, you have two ways to handle it. It either kind of takes you and you become devastated by it and to the point where you can't get out of it, or you say, now what do I need to learn from this? And what I did was consciously paid attention to the woman that I was on the dance floor, was really able to captivate an audience and impress the judges. And I said, so what am I doing that I'm not doing perhaps in everyday life in a more conscious manner? And so I paid attention to how I walked, to how I used my body, to how I did physical contact, all of these things, eye contact, in order to create a more alluring, sensual appeal to me on the dance floor, and then began to just try some of those things when I would walk down the street, when I would be standing in line at a coffee shop, when I would be sitting and listening and having a conversation with someone, in just constant, any kind of situation, just really pay attention to my body language and what I was transmitting, and more consciously paid attention of really saying, how do I make myself sort of become more feminine in this instant instead of just paying attention to the task at hand? And and it really changed the way I showed up in the world even more so. And then from there, Alec, I just began to share that with other people that I knew and see if it would work for them. And it did. And then from that created, wrote a book and sort of journaled all of the experiences and started to share it with other women. And they were kind of getting the same results also. So it's something that we all have innately. I think we just at different points in our lives. And I think as we become adults and have responsibilities, and specifically for women, I think to be successful in today's world where, you're much more in your masculine energy that requires you to be goal-oriented, driven, and, and really strive for success, it can wither away at your feminine essence. And this is where I noticed women will let that kind of happen, and then all of a sudden wake up in their 40s and later and say, how did I get here? How did I become so rigid and so stiff and not love every inch of me and every part of me, So this is how it all kind of came about.
I'm a huge fan of dance. I just love the concept of taking that flavor from dance and infusing it into day-to-day life. Just sounds like something that would give your regular everyday moments just that little bit of flavor that...
Yeah.
So turning the conversation to men, in your work and working with guys or observing guys, what are some of the common mistakes that they might make with respect to their body language or perhaps even other nonverbal communication such as facial expressions?
So, I think, I'm coming from the dance perspective and a woman perspective. Okay. So one, I have to say is bad posture or slouching. That's something that I work, whether it's on a woman to be more attractive or as a student of dance coaching them. You cannot create the kind of movement that you want to create when you're not aware of your posture. And it's the scariest thing, Alec, because every time I walk into a studio or walk in the street, all I see is crooked people. It's the funniest thing. And I think it's a little bit conducive of the world that we live in, where most people work from their desk or on a computer, and it doesn't enhance creating good posture. So I think what that does is create a very tired look, even an unhealthy lifestyle. For me, it can be that extreme. Someone with a bad posture or slouches, I almost think that they don't really take care of themselves the same way. And then there's the reality of they could look not confident, shy, or they want to remain invisible. But for me, it even stems at a health level. Like, how conscious are you that your posture can actually exude the sense that you are a healthy person? So bad posture and slouching is big for me. And I think a lot of women will notice that instantly and just inadvertently, they're attracted to a man that has certain kind of leadership qualities, a man that makes her feel safe and like and I think just the posture alone speaks in numerous ways that way. So bad posture is one of them. Right. The other one I'll say is a lack of eye contact or even wandering eyes. Good eye contact really signifies trust, clear communication, someone who really knows how to listen within a conversation. And it makes a woman feel that she's important enough to be noticed when someone maintains a good eye contact. And I think a lot of people, because we're used to multitasking and looking at ourselves, we kind of had very wandering eyes, constantly moving, or our heads usually down, distracted, paying attention to something else. So and overall, there's an essence of not knowing how to be present, how to really sense a moment. And I think eye contact can really help it to enhance that. It shows that you're interested in the person and that you're really trustworthy. Like, especially that moment. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. For me, that's like the tell-all. When I'm being introduced to someone and, I'll say male, female dynamics, and he says hello and he looks at, and he says, nice to meet you, Patty. And he maintains the eye contact a little bit longer than most people do. And I'm like, wow, this person gets it. He gets that this is a moment to create impact with me, and he's taking the time to do it. And I think we underestimate that. I know I'm very sensitive to that, but I think overall we all do, because most people just kind of just quickly do the task. Hi, how are you? And then move on to something else instead of just being present a little bit longer than normal. And that's what eye contact sometimes helps to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, on both fronts, but eye contact in particular, I find that people greet you. I mean, forget male-female interactions, just interactions with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody shakes your hand and they're not looking you in the eyes. It almost feels like they're being dismissive, like they're just going through a motion rather than actually being engaged in that moment and communicating that they're actually interested in meeting you. And eye contact makes that difference.
Absolutely.
It's a bit of a personal pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, I get it. And which leads up to a little bit of this idea of nervous hands or nervous energy. You know, too much movement can make someone seem uncomfortable or not confident, almost like they're trying to control their nervous energy or nervous tick. And there's something about stillness. And, you know, has been my theme lately in all of my coaching, whether it's in dancing or in interaction with people, is stillness really creates moments of impact, whether it's in speech, whether it's in dance or in music. There's something about being able to be still and being okay with that. And it's kind of like sends a message of, I see you. I hear you. You know, this is great. And it almost leaves you desiring for more. So having this kind of calm energy is great because it doesn't make you come across as someone that continuously needs to be ahead of the conversation and be speeding up into something else. It doesn't help you be present. So there's this kind of constant nervous energy, nervous hands. I mean, we're saying hands for body language, but it's an overall thing. It's an energetic feel a little bit to that. So I don't know if you've ever observed that, but I know that's one of the things that even in my presence, when I'm with someone that is that way, I will consciously try to slow down my energy more. So hopefully they'll vibe with me where I'm helping them it's okay. There's no need to speed. It's a rush through this. It's all good. I don't need to get anywhere fast. And then they sometimes if they're more perceptive of that, jump into the vibe. But I notice that nervous kind of constant movement energy, it's really hard to sit still and to pay attention to someone when they're in that state.
You know, it's making me think of something. I'm drawing a little bit of a parallel in my mind. And over the last couple of years, a lot of guys have been obsessed with this notion of alpha and being an alpha male. And so guys who don't necessarily feel like they are that, they'll try to overcompensate by dominating conversations, moving around a little too much, more than they need to, just in order to attract attention to themselves and appear to be more dominant in their social circle than they might actually be. And I find that just usually looks really ridiculous. It just makes people uncomfortable and makes them look like they're not socially attuned.
I completely agree. As much as I teach body language, it's a way to help change your own vibe so that you become more confident. However, a conversation or being with another person is a constant dialogue, whether it's nonverbal or verbal. And for me, there needs to be more than just, okay, it's all about me trying to project, this confidence and then forgetting about the human being that's in front of you. You can't really do that because then you become arrogant and self-absorbed, whether it's male or female. You have to be aware that, it takes two people to dance. It takes two people to have a conversation. So you can't just dance for yourself. You can't just speak for yourself. You can't just move for yourself. You're always being adjusting, the dynamics of any conversation with the other person that's there. And you can lead it in a direction, but always be aware of the willingness of the partner, and there's this sort of message or phrase that I love to use a lot that I got from Donnie Burns. And he's a dance coach that has been around for many years and brilliant. And he talks about the ability of melting a woman. And you have to be important that before two people get together, we all show up with this ice that's thick, be it man or woman. And you can't just sort of connect and think it's all going to set right in place. You have to, through, I'm talking dance terms now, but you can see how this can very easily interrelate or transcend in natural everyday life circumstances where you want to breathe with her, you want to calm her and allow her to understand that in your presence, she is safe and I have you. And that is not speed and constant motion. It's just being present. And I interestingly created this kind of definition of being charismatic. So if you show up with charisma, I share this with women and with men. I'm sure it's the same idea. So instead of trying to show up as an alpha male or as only the sensual woman, and because women are often afraid to come across as sexual, so they kind of hold back, and so they need something before to kind of allow themselves to show more of their sensual side, and men perhaps to not come across as a creep or something that's inappropriate if he uses the idea of showing up charismatic, and then I defined what that meant. Being a charismatic person, and then the social virtues attached to that, and how you can create that before you even begin to do anything else. Does that make sense?
It does. And actually, I'd like to explore that a little bit deeper. So when we're talking about showing up in a more charismatic way, particularly before we even open our mouth, what are some of the specific things that we can start to do in order to show up in that way?
So we'll look at the physical essence of being, let's say, a charismatic man, and then we can look at the dialogue of a charismatic person, and ultimately the essence when two people show up together, or when the group of people show up, someone can stand out as charismatic. And for me, they're left with two feelings. And I had this discussion with a colleague of mine who's in the dating world. His name is Frank Kermit. And we've had many head-to-head conversations about dating and the reality of that, and men and women. And he brought to my attention that charisma is often defined for him, and I loved this definition, as the ability to leave someone with a better impression of themselves and of you who shows up in the conversation. So not just of you who's there, but you leave the people around you feeling better about themselves. How cool is that? That's a charismatic person. So I thought, wow, how do you create that? So in a physical sense, because I think there's more than just the physical, but in a physical sense, you want to become aware of, if you look at attracting a woman, I'll say that, the leadership and the posturing, meaning you want to be the kind of guy that physically knows how to stand in a manner that takes up space and doesn't apologize for it. But I don't mean in an over the top way, in a way where, his spine is straight, his shoulder blades are down, his legs are a little bit wider than hip distance apart. He has a calmness to his energy where he's collected and he's cool, and he's okay with observing. And then he participates in what's going on. And it's the participation that is key. And so for me, it's really being aware of what are the social virtues that people need when they're around you. What do they need to feel? And when you know these social virtues, you always show up giving that. And then a person leaves the interaction feeling, wow, that was cool. So I can share with you those virtues if you'd like.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, cool. So I created the acronym ACEs, just to kind of remember what those words are. And the first letter is A, and it's an appreciation. And an appreciation is really being the kind of person that recognizes people's qualities and is able to compliment them. So be an observer of your surroundings, or of the woman or women or people that are there, and just notice what makes them unique and call them on it and share that. For me, it's wonderful when someone gives me a compliment. It can be a simple one, but what if it's one that's even specific, where, I noticed that, he may have noticed that, that scarf that you have around your neck really suits your style, for example. He didn't just say, oh, you look great. And not that that's bad either. I'll take it. But, having the ability to notice that I'm put together a certain way. Or it could be the way I talk about a certain subject, that I am enthusiastic, and that he might notice that and says, you really get enthusiastic when it comes to dancing. I said, I know, it's like my thing. And then I'll go off on a tangent from that. So just paying attention to people's qualities and compliment them on that. Notice that. Everybody wants validation. That I believe that, in every essence of my life, that whenever I go somewhere, people want to be noticed for what their gift is. So just pay attention to people's uniqueness and compliment them on it. So that's the appreciation part. Then we have connection. And connection means having the ability to find a common ground with someone. And that common ground can be a common friend, a hobby, a topic of conversation that kind of gets them excited, and you notice you like that topic also. So that common ground, I do this a lot when I'm coaching. The first thing I do is sort of listen to perhaps or watch someone struggle, and then let them know the commonality I have with them, whether it's within that struggle, because I know I recognize it and can see it, and let me help you get out of that. Or it could sometimes be, this happened to me while I was in Boston. I was coaching a gentleman. I was introduced to him. Oh, this man is from Brazil and he's learning how to dance, and it's really great, and it's really changing his life. He's becoming much more aware of his body. And so I listened to the teacher, and then I had a conversation with him. And the moment he spoke, I noticed a specific accent, and I said to him, wait a second, have you ever studied or worked in Israel? And he goes, yeah, I studied there for many years. I said, because you sound just like an Israeli. And because I worked there for a few weeks, I kind of picked up on the intonation and the articulation. And it was amazing to watch, Alec, how he suddenly, zoom, part of his wall melted because I saw him. Does that make sense? So there's this common ground that you want to find in people and acknowledge, yeah, I actually get what you're coming from, because I have that too. So appreciation, common ground. Another one is elevate the mood, is having the ability to elevate the mood within the context that you're in. So sometimes it's just being playful or being able to leave someone with a smile. So I usually use the context that I watch for the environment, kind of have fun within the environment with the people that I'm with. So kind of be the kind of person that kind of elevates the mood a little bit. And the last thing is self-expression. And what I mean by that is there's always things that we're learning as a human being, and sometimes just kind of sharing your curiosity about life and what you like about things that you're learning with that person kind of creates an interesting conversation. So those are sort of the four virtues that I've found comes up a lot when you're trying to create a nice connection with someone. And it helps you show up in a way where at least let me just know how to create a fun conversation that's engaging and captivating. And then from there, you can turn it up a little bit and add the nonverbal sexual tension maneuvers where you do have extended eye contact, where maybe you will reach out and touch her hand, where maybe, you will lean in because, she's giving you cues where she's interested in this conversation, how it's building up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the overarching theme that I've noticed that I really want to point out is that you're almost taking care of the people around. You're making them feel good about themselves. And to go back and link this to what I said about this whole concept of alpha male, I find that that's the big piece that guys often miss when they're trying to appear as these dominant alpha guys, is that true alpha male not only stands out as potentially the strongest, but he's also the one that's taking care and leading the others around him. And I find that you captured that in a lot of your examples.
Exactly. And again, the attractive, it can get old, this kind of like, hey, I'm just this strong guy. And when you show up too much with sexual energy, it can almost turn a woman off in some ways, because it's, yeah, I get it. I get that you want to, go to bed with me. Like, no different than I want to go to bed with you. But how do we create the kind of desire and the mystery and let me find out what is at the core of you? And these are just ways to like you said, and something about a guy that gets that knows how to sort of, when I say dominate a conversation, knows how to lead it, knows how to observe. And I say man or woman can go in there and share in their experiences and understand that it's a dialogue. So it's not a one-way street. And it becomes easy to actually talk when you know this. Okay. So, add a little bit of compliments, find the common ground, try to elevate the mood, and you practice this with everybody, not just the girl you're interested in, but with people that you meet continuously. And then you become easily charismatic because you're the kind of person that I love being around you, because conversation is never awkward. It's natural. It just kind of flows. So you become somebody that pays attention to what's around you and how to maneuver within that. And so it becomes the difference between doing something or sensing something. So it's a nice way of combining that. So that's just sort of my take on that. And then it becomes easier. Watch your cues, observe her. We give you signals. And, I teach women, please be evident with your signals, because sometimes men, they don't know. And if they do, one of the things that I've noticed with many men, when I was dating a lot more, now I'm in a relationship, so that's kind of done with. But when I was dating, I used to purposely have conversations about masculinity and femininity, and they would often say how many times when they showed up in a manner that was in their eyes, chivalry, an act of chivalry, which I get they were doing, it was often reprimanded. And I felt terrible that a guy would often go through that with a woman. And I made women aware of that. You don't even realize how many times you might be emasculating him or telling him not to behave this way because you kind of want to do it all yourself. And so it makes them hesitate to take the first touch or make the first move because maybe this woman doesn't like that. And I believe you still should. But I do recognize the hesitancy that sometimes men have. And so it's a little bit more complicated than, for that sort of dynamic to always go easily, because sometimes women inadvertently put a wall up to that but they still want someone who pays attention. They just don't realize that they're doing it. So sometimes I tell guys, be compassionate with the women, and women, be compassionate with the men, because you don't even realize how you're giving a different message from just turning away from him and saying, no, thank you, I got it. You think you're being nice, and he's like, okay, I guess she doesn't want me to help her, and then he stops doing it.
Yeah, we could spend an entire episode talking just about that. I think it's kind of the bane of modern society, is that we're all walking around a little bit confused as to what our gender roles are supposed to be this day. There are guys that they're not sure if chivalry is going to get them ahead or put them a step behind sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one more question on the physical aspect of an interaction, specifically pertaining to touch. So I've actually heard you say this a long time ago, and that's that we can be afraid to reach out and touch somebody as if we're committing some kind of crime. I find this is kind of a big issue in North America. You're in Montreal, probably even more so in Toronto. We tend to be a little more conservative here. But I wanted you to talk about the value of making that physical contact with the person you're speaking with, and how a guy can do that in the way that builds attraction. Now, I'm not talking about sexual touching. I'm talking about a tap on the shoulder, holding the hand, things like that.
And I agree. I believe touch is essential, and I often tell women to sometimes it's okay if you even initiate it at times, because of this hesitation that men sometimes have, because they don't want to come across as creepy or inappropriate, so they'll hold back. But I do think that sometimes it's more of a timing thing, which means, let's say, you and I were having this conversation, we're in front of each other, and you notice the cues that I give you, in the sense that I'm responding to this conversation in this really cool manner. I might begin to play with my hair a little bit, or tilt my head and expose, my vulnerable neck, or I might begin to even gently, caress my shoulder. It's kind of letting you know that I'm enjoying this. She's leaning in because maybe she's saying, wow, this is really cool. I really enjoy being with you. And sometimes just touching her hand or her arm within the conversation, that kind of like when there's a funny moment and you say, oh, that was really, I love the way you say that. And you kind of touch your hand to create an extra sort of moment of impact where I really like how you said that. And that's cool. Or, you kind of, within the conversation, it has to kind of flow naturally. And I think the hand, the arm, the shoulder are the safer places to go, but you can't go right away. You just got to warm her up a little bit, because if you go in too soon, she might not be receptive to that. So if you're still not sure, you can compliment her ring and notice and touch her ring and say, wow, that's a really cool ring. Is there a story behind that? Where did you get it? And if she doesn't pull away so quickly, you know that she's comfortable with your touch, and maybe you can go in for another, time sooner, so sometimes you have to start with that kind of, approach just to sense your way through that. But I think when we go back to the idea of creating the kind of social context where she's kind of getting engaged in your presence, then it becomes easier to step in. I think sometimes men just kind of go, I can touch the hand and it happened too soon, but it has to kind of flow naturally. So sometimes it's just because she says something funny. So you kind of touch and agree with it and say, that is funny. Or, you say, you know what, I get what you mean. And you kind of hold the arm and say, I really like the way you talked about that. And then you move your hand away. And, so you start shorter hand touches and then keep them there a little bit longer. And again, I'm always talking about hand or arm or shoulder to be the safe zone first. But she's giving you cues. Like you see how, what I'm saying about she's kind of verbally allowing you to come in, non-verbally allow you to come in.
Right. So actually, let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. So you've given a few examples already of how a woman might be sending you nonverbal cues that she's interested in. She's inviting you into her world, whether it's touch or to approach. What are some of the other common cues that a woman might give a man through nonverbal communication?
So basically, so we said like one of the ways I often notice when someone is captivating me, I could sometimes lean in. So the women will lean in a little bit and into the conversation. And then sometimes she'll lean back and then she'll lean in again. She maintains eye contact longer. She smiles a lot because you're making her feel good. She's not watching somebody else. She might even turn her body towards you more because she's really getting into the conversation with you or enjoys your presence. So instead of kind of first, she might start off a little sideways with you because she's not sure if she should give you her whole frontal, side or her whole frontal perspective, but kind of works her way around and suddenly she turns around to face you. She might accidentally touch your leg with her foot. She may, you kind of see how that is that answering some of your questions? So I'm kind of going with, yes, there's the head tilt. She plays with her hair. She smiles a lot. She moves in. She faces you more. She might even initiate a first contact if she's daring. I believe women should be more daring with that. I don't think it's wrong or bad to initiate that because sometimes, again, in today's kind of complexity and confusion, sometimes men need that. So I'll do that at times. And then it's just watch how she physically wants to get closer to you. And sometimes if she's shy, she hesitates because she's also shy. She's not sure. Because again, I think men just have to understand that beneath the surface, the kind of woman that is, I'll say, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not saying the woman that's sexually comfortable with herself, because sometimes women, they are, but they're so afraid of showing up overtly sexual that they'll turn it off more. So it's not that they're not interested. They're just really trying to open that valve slowly. So you have to be patient with that. And I think patience is key to anything, that most people are too wanting the speed and the outcome without understanding the process and the patience of the process, because a lot gets discovered in that patience. And so be patient with allowing things to trickle in the right direction instead of turning the valve full on, because then it's probably going to go the wrong way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And those are some great examples. There are probably 100 other things that guys could potentially watch for, but I just want to hit on a few common ones because I know a lot of men can be a little oblivious in this regard. I remember listening to an interview, and this was a dating coach speaking about his interaction with a love doctor. And the love doctor was just a guy on the side of a street with a piece of cardboard that said he'll tell you about your love life for $5. So just for fun, they went up to talk to him, and he turns to the cousin and he says, well, clearly women don't like you. I mean, just look at you. And he was kind of like dressed like a gangster and had a bad attitude and was a really negative person. And then he turns to the other guy and he goes, you have a different problem. Women are interested in you, but you're just too blind to see it. And that's exactly what he was talking about. Women were sending him all sorts of subtle signals that he just wasn't seeing. And as soon as he became conscious of it, he started paying attention. Then he realized he was getting these very subtle invitations to come up, to go speak, to interact all the time. And so that's what was behind the questions, just to bring guys' awareness to this a little bit more.
Yes. I get that. And I do. And again, I even think because we don't socially gather as human beings as much as we used to. I mean, we kind of tend to be, introvert more in this society. Even when we're in a social gathering, we kind of put our heads down and everybody's on a phone. So I think some of those things are probably even more important that you're suggesting, those cues, because they're even more disconnected people right now. So it requires it to be, shine a light on that. You're right. Because I think the things that we naturally did when we socialized, we sort of learned to pick up on that. Imagine in today's society where we don't even socialize as much. There's not as many physical gatherings where there isn't a distraction.
Absolutely. This is probably going to be my last question on body language, but I didn't want to miss this. And there are a lot of things that guys could potentially be watching out for when it comes to body language. Their posture, how they're holding their head, how they're standing, their hand gestures, their facial expressions. I mean, the list could be really extensive. And for a guy that's just becoming aware of this for the first time and trying to work on his body language, it could almost have the opposite effect. It can be very overwhelming, cause him to overthink the whole situation, and actually make him even more awkward than he might have otherwise been. So what kind of advice would you give somebody like that? Somebody that might not have his body language together, is finally aware of it and is working on it. Give some advice to him that he could work on it without being overwhelmed by 100 things at the same time.
Yeah, again, one, I'll say if there's one thing only you want to focus on is just having good posture. And that you could work on when you're walking down the street, when you're standing. I mean, I go with this with women also. You want to be able to become aware of being the tallest physical version of yourself. And that means really, I can go into specifics, but ultimately it's just being aware that your spine needs to be straight, which often means you have to engage your shoulder blades so that your chest is lifted. You want to stand with your feet at least hip distance, if not a little bit further apart. And you want to just be that kind of, the silverback gorilla, just knows how to hang back and watch, and so not be so anxious. And that's already big, and that's enough. And then the next part would be, become the kind of person that is charismatic through the social virtues that we discussed earlier. Because I think if you really have that approach, if you learn how to leave any social situation with a feeling where people have a great impression about you and a better impression of themselves when they're in your presence, you've just hit the jackpot. It won't even matter, what you look like, because when I'm around you, I feel better. And I love being around you because your energy is contagious and it just lifts my spirit up. So the social virtues of what people are looking for, if you become the kind of person that practices that, and don't just wait to practice that with a woman, practice that with any interaction you have. You become someone that is much more sensitive to the world and to people's needs. And it's kind of cool because you just know how to handle it, and then it becomes easy. It becomes you become less caught up with, am I doing all the right things to attract her? And I think women more than men, at least that's my feeling, women are attracted to a personality, a persona, more than an actual physical thing. So there's something about him that I always say that somehow when I'm in his presence, I feel like I feel safe. I feel like he can take care of things. I feel like he gets people. I observe the way he interacts and how he treats people. And I want to be around a person that knows that. And I think that's someone who's just too self-absorbed with one thing comes across as arrogant. And for me, all the body language tricks in the world or all the whatever, I don't want to be around that. I want to be around a person who cares about humanity, because that means you're a powerful person. You get it. You see life and you see people. So that's why I'm all about showing up with those virtues. Just become attentive to that, and then add the body language with that, and it just it's congruent. It coincides. You stand like someone that is confident, but then you also know how to have a conversation with people about that.
If I was to add something, I would say that to help guys avoid becoming overwhelmed with too many things at a time, I would almost suggest try to be still first. Whether you're standing or sitting, try to be still and relax. And then one piece at a time, try to introduce whatever elements you might be missing. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we talked about briefly the impact of stillness, and because nervous energy is distracting and it can make someone come across as they're trying to control everything around them and too nervous. So I 100% agree that stillness is really the way to be present in the moment, because you can't be present without being still. So the ability to be still creates the ability for you to connect with what's going on right now. And then you can create the appropriate action to enhance what's going on. But if you're too busy with the action first and don't know to observe your environment and be still in that environment, then you might go about it too distracted, just kind of putting one thing on top of the other. So it's exactly correct.
So this one is really just for fun. I hear this being said all the time, and I thought it'd be fun to ask a dancer. It's often said that women will make assumptions about how a man is in the bedroom based on the way he moves on the dance floor. Do you think that's actually true? Do women actually make those kind of assumptions?
Yeah, I think that's actually kind of sweet. And I will say this. I think the notion is more directly relating to having rhythm. And what I mean by rhythm is really having the ability to hear pulse, whether it's in a song, music, whether it's in someone's body vibe, whether it's in, when you're aware of everybody has a heartbeat or music has a heartbeat, and you learn to take in that pulse, you become someone who can physically experience the pulse and therefore show up as a more rhythmical person. And that can sometimes come across as saying I'm sure he's good in bed, because you're just aware of pulse. And I actually teach this a lot now. I've been doing a lot of classes on musicality, but specifically related to rhythm and knowing how to hear. And I think a lot of people think they're tone deaf or they think they don't have rhythm, but they just don't listen to pulse. And once you know how to break apart those pulse, you create a rhythm. And I think everybody innately has a rhythm. It's just hearing the pulse of that music and allowing it to transcend in your body. So when someone is allowing that to happen, that means they're in touch with their body. And that's perhaps why dancers people will look at a dancer and say, oh my God, they must be good in bed, is because they have this sense of rhythm, and then they know how to use their body to enhance the rhythm. But I think anybody can learn that.
I find it almost works the other way around. I can almost always tell if a person is a dancer just by the way they move through daily life, by the way they walk, by the way they sit, by the way they gesture. It almost feels like they're moving through life with rhythm.
Yes, because you're much more connected to your body. So you know that your body changes your state. And so and all that to say that, it's not a clear answer, yes, but I think if you're a musician, you can have the same thing, right? Why? Because they're very aware of a rhythm in music. And so, I can use the same kind of myth, if you will, about musicians. And I just think that everybody has the ability to tap into that. It's just really connecting with that, because then you do walk through life differently. And you observe life's rhythms and you hear it everywhere. Imagine now when you're in bed with someone and you're aware of that, the rhythm in her breath, the rhythm in her own body movements. It allows you to be present. It's not about the act itself. It's about physically flowing with each other. And I think dancers innately practice that all the time. So they tend to be more sensitive to that. But this does not mean that a person that doesn't know how to dance can't do that or is not aware of that.
So if guys wanted to get a hold of you or to learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
They can find me on my website is sensualitysecrets.com. If they want to email me with any direct questions, they can email me at Patty, Patty, at sensualitysecrets.com. And that way they can, have a direct conversation with me.
Of course, guys, both of those links will be in the show notes on mensdatingmastery.com. Patty, thank you very much for this conversation. Had a blast talking to you.
Thank you, Alec. Always a pleasure.
That is it for this episode, guys. I found what Patty had to say just loaded with practical, tangible, and actionable advice. I hope that you did too. As always, you can get in touch with me at alec@mensdatingmastery.com. That's Alec with a C. Or if you'd like to learn more about MDM, you can visit mensdatingmastery.com. And if you're enjoying the show, then please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or in whatever your favorite podcast directory is. Do it for the good karma for no other reason. Thanks for listening, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to Men's Dating Mastery, a podcast dedicated to improving the lives of men and the women around them.